Tonight, you return not to sleep alone, but to yourself, as the noise of the day slowly fades into the hush of night. Allow your breath to soften, let each inhale guide you inward, and each exhale carry away the weight of thought. This is not a place of answers or achievement. This is a space where nothing is asked of you, except to rest. You are not here to fix anything, not here to be productive. You are here to remember what peace feels like. Tonight, we'll walk together through quiet mountains of Zen. We'll pass ancient doorways, pause beside still ponds, and listen for wisdom in the rustle of bamboo. Each story is a gentle wave, not to stir you but to cradle you, not to awaken, but to return you, slowly, kindly, to the calm beneath all things. And before we begin, no matter where you are in the world, no matter what time your clock may read, take a moment to tell us in the comments, where are you listening from tonight? Now, let us begin. Let us step into the first ripple of this night's stillness, the story of a bamboo grove and a monk who learned to stop fighting the wind. The night deepens, and the silence wraps around you like a warm shawl left by someone who once loved you without needing to say so. Outside your window, if you listen closely, you might hear the trees speaking to the wind, not with words, but with the soft creaking of their limbs, the whisper of leaves surrendering to the breeze, the same way breath leaves the body at the end of a long day. And in this moment, as your body sinks gently into stillness, let yourself walk, not in the world of thought, but down a quiet moss-lined path that winds through a grove of bamboo. There, beneath a pale moon veiled by clouds, a small temple sits nestled against the base of a forested hill. The lantern at its gate glows faintly, trembling slightly in the night air. And in the inner courtyard, beside a square stone basin filled with water and stars, a young monk is sweeping fallen leaves, again and again. Though the wind keeps returning them, his robes flutter with each gust. His brow is furrowed, not with effort, but with resistance, a quiet frustration at the world not obeying his will. He sweeps to clear the path. The wind returns to undo it. He sweeps again, faster now, and again the wind stirs the bamboo and scatters the leaves as if in reply. Watching from a few steps away, the old master says nothing, until, after a while, he steps forward and gently places his hand over the young monks. The broom comes to stillness. The master speaks, voice like water poured over warm stone. Why sweep what the wind has chosen to teach? The monk lowers his eyes. There is silence, the kind that doesn't ask to be filled. The master kneels, places the broom on the ground, and watches the leaves fall, not as obstacles, but as invitations. They sit together beneath the swaying stalks of bamboo and do nothing. And it is in this doing nothing that the mind at last finds peace. There is no lesson written, no moral offered, but something in the air settles, and the wind, once an enemy, now simply passes through. This story, like the bamboo, does not resist your understanding, nor does it demand it. But somewhere, in the stillness after it ends, the message lingers. We live much of our lives in subtle war with what is. We try to sweep clear a path the world never promised would stay clean. We try to hold back the tides of uncertainty, to direct the winds of people's opinions, to pin the future like a butterfly to a wall. But life is not made to stay where we place it. It moves, it bends, it dances with or without us. And true peace, the kind that lives in the marrow, not just the surface, arises only when we stop trying to force the world to be still, and instead become still within the world. The monk could have swept all night, but the lesson waited not in the act of clearing, but in the willingness to sit among the mess, and see it not as disorder, but as design. When we stop resisting the wind, we find the strength that does not fight, the strength that flows. When was the last time you let go of trying to fix the world and simply sat beside it, with nothing in your hands but breath? When did you last stop sweeping? Take one more slow breath. Let it be softer than the one before. And now, let us move without haste, like fog over stone, into the next ripple of the night. A story of an empty bowl, and the gratitude that blooms not in fullness, but in space. There's a kind of silence that arrives only after acceptance, the kind that no longer waits for the wind to stop, or the leaves to still. And as that silence gathers within you, like water finding its own level, let yourself follow the thread of night just a little further. No need to rise, no need to walk. Simply drift through the slow-turning mist that now rises between the bamboo, through a clearing touched by morning light, not yet born, through the soft air that smells faintly of sandalwood and smoke. Let us arrive now at the edge of a small village, in a time so distant that clocks do not yet tick, and no one asks what time it is, only whether the tea is warm. It is early. The sky has not yet chosen a color, and in a tiny hut at the village's edge, a man with travel-worn robes approaches the home of a hermit monk, known only to those who seek. Without knowing why, the monk is old, or perhaps only appears so. Time folds differently on such faces. His garden is sparse, swept with care, but never with urgency. A pot simmers above a quiet fire. The only sound is the occasional pop of a pine log surrendering its shape to warmth. The traveler bows. The monk nods and gestures for him to sit. Without speaking, the monk takes a small ceramic bowl, unpainted, irregular, with a faint crack along its edge, and gently places it before the traveler. But he does not fill it. He simply sets it down. The traveler looks at the bowl, then at the monk, then at the pot, and waits. Moments pass, or minutes, or more. Finally, the traveler, confused, slightly annoyed, yet still polite, says, "Master, it is empty." The monk smiles, not kindly, not cruelly, just knowingly. "Good," he says. "Then it can receive," and he turns back to the fire. No more is said. The traveler, unsure, sits with the bowl, at first, still expecting something to happen. Then slowly, something else begins to unfold. In the silence, he notices how his breathing has slowed, how the steam from the pot traces gentle spirals into the air, how his hands, gripping the bowl, begin to relax, not from having received anything, but from finally not needing to. In the end, the bowl is filled, but by then, it hardly matters, because something far more important has been emptied. The story is simple, but its roots grow deep. So often, we believe peace comes from addition, from gaining, achieving, acquiring more answers, more things, more comfort. But peace, like this bowl, comes not from what is placed into us, but from the space we allow to remain unfilled. In fact, it lives most freely in the presence of emptiness, in the spaces where expectation has softened and presence is all that remains. The monk did not deny the traveler soup. He offered him something far rarer, the experience of being still in lack and not suffering from it, of seeing that the bowl's worth did not depend on its contents, nor, perhaps, does our own. We rush through days with arms outstretched, asking the world to fill us. But the ones who sleep peacefully, who smile gently for no reason, have learned this secret. What is empty can be beautiful. What is simple can be complete. And sometimes, what appears to be missing is what makes space for peace. So ask yourself now, as the breath gently rises and falls, what part of your life have you tried too long to fill, instead of sitting quietly with? And what might enter, if you let it remain open? The fire in the story fades. The bowl rests, now filled or not, it makes no difference. And your breath remains, steady, quiet, enough. Let us keep walking now, not on feet, but on feeling. There is another garden ahead. A mirror waits there, but it does not reflect the face, only the fog of emotion and the stillness that waits beneath it. From the garden's quiet bowl, we move onward, as gently as mist gliding over still water. There is no rush, there is only the next breath, the next step into the hush of night. And as we follow this unfolding stream of stories, the world around us begins to fade, not in darkness, but in gentleness. The sky now holds the faintest blue, like a memory of dawn, though no sun yet warms the earth. You find yourself standing outside a wooden gate. Its hinges don't creak, for nothing here forces its way forward. You push gently, and it opens into a small courtyard, shaped like a square within a circle. Smooth river stones line the edge of a sand garden, each one placed by a hand that was neither hurried nor idle. At the far end, a single structure stands, more shelter than home, open to the air, its walls woven from reeds and time. Inside sits a monk, young still, but not peaceful. He sits before a mirror. It is old like him, but not cracked, only fogged, not by weather, but by something less visible, a weight inside. His shoulders rise and fall too quickly. His hands twist in his lap. His eyes flicker toward the mirror, as though searching for an answer or avoiding one. The master enters, silent as ever. He places a bowl of water beside the young monk, then sits across from him without a word. Time stretches. Finally, the young monk speaks. My mind is clouded. I do not know how to clear it. The master looks at the mirror, then at the bowl, then at the monk, and says only, name the fog. The young monk stares. I don't understand, the master replies. The fog does not vanish because you fight it. It lifts when it is named. He gestures to the mirror. Not what you see, but what colors what you see. Name it. The young monk closes his eyes. At first there is only silence. Then, softly, I am anxious. Pause, I am angry. Pause, I am afraid. And with each word the mirror begins, ever so slightly, to clear. Not because the fog was banished, but because it was welcomed. And suddenly, the face staring back is not a stranger. It is himself, unhidden, unarmed, unashamed. And for the first time that morning, he breathes. No effort, no resistance, only breath. There are many ways we are taught to handle difficult emotions. Most involve pushing them away, dressing them up, or distracting ourselves from their presence. But what if the mind, like this mirror, does not need fixing, only honesty? What if your inner world becomes distorted, not because it is broken, but because you have not yet dared to speak its truth? In the practice of mindfulness, the quiet, Buddhist art of witnessing, there is a teaching known in the West as name it to tame it. It is not a cure, it is not even a solution, but it is a doorway. To name a feeling is not to solve it, it is to bow to it, to allow it room at the table, to say, I see you, I am not afraid of you. You may pass through, but you do not define me. When we name what arises, sadness, fear, fatigue, resentment, we do not become the emotion. We become the space in which the emotion is allowed to move. And like the fog on a mirror, its power diminishes the moment we stop resisting it. Perhaps what keeps you from sleep tonight is not the problem itself, but the pressure to hold it in silence. Perhaps the weight will not lift until you give it a name. So now, in this quiet, with no one watching, ask softly within yourself, what emotion have you hidden behind your eyes tonight? And if you gave it a name, even just one whispered in your thoughts, what might soften? The monk in the mirror fades, not because he disappears, but because, like the fog, he is no longer in the way. Your breath slows, not forced, just released. Let us continue, not walking now, but floating into the next quiet shore. There, in a hut where the leaves boil and the body breathes, we meet an old tea maker who teaches not about time, but about energy. By now, the stories begin to feel less like tales and more like weather, gentle patterns of wind and warmth moving through you. The more you listen, the less there is to grasp. You are not learning something. You are returning to something simple, something still. And now, without needing to know how, you arrive again. This time, in a mountain village wrapped in morning mist. The roofs are low and slanted, the paths are stone and worn, and the air smells faintly of firewood and drying herbs. There is a quietness here that doesn't ask for silence. It simply is. At the edge of the village, beside a narrow stream, stands a thatched hut. Its door is open, always. Inside lives an old woman. She is not a teacher, nor is she a sage. She has no title, no followers, only one task she performs each morning, as she has for decades. She makes tea, but not for a crowd. Only one cup, one single, carefully prepared cup of green tea. Each morning, she wakes before the light fully reaches the floor. She opens the window and lets the chill brush across her skin. She bows to the teapot, as if greeting an old friend. Then she selects exactly 3 leaves from a wooden box, never more. She warms the water. She rinses the cup. She waits. The villagers sometimes ask her, why only 1 cup? Surely you could make more, share it, sell it, serve it. But she only smiles and says, even a leaf gives all it has. Should I not give all of me to just this? One day, a traveler passing through the region, busy-minded, eyes darting, breath always a bit short, hears about the woman and comes to visit her, hoping perhaps for wisdom or perhaps simply for novelty. He asks to try her tea. She agrees, but on one condition: you must sit with me, in silence, from dawn until the steam fades. He agrees, though he does not understand why. They sit. The tea is poured, not quickly, not slowly, just completely. He drinks, and something happens. Or rather, nothing happens. No revelation, no vision, no transformation, just stillness. A kind of rest he had not felt in years. A quiet he did not know he missed. A full-bodied pause in a life that had been sprinting without destination. The tea is not magic, but she is right. Even a leaf gives all it has, and that is enough. So often, we live like the traveler, scattering our energy across endless tasks, messages, commitments, saying yes before we feel ready, rushing to fill each minute with more action, more effort, more giving, until there is nothing left to feel. We confuse depletion with duty, exhaustion with virtue. But energy is not infinite. It is not something we must hoard, nor is it something we should waste. It is something to be offered, wholly and wisely. The old woman made 1 cup of tea, not because she lacked time or leaves, but because she understood that the depth of presence matters more than the breadth of effort. That to give fully, you must first be full. This is not selfishness. This is sacred balance. To know when to pour and when to steep. To know what drains you and what restores you. And to make room each day, even just once, for one act done, not for efficiency, but for sincerity. Your life does not need more speed. It needs more still cups of tea. So ask yourself, quietly now, with no pressure to answer aloud, where are you leaking energy? And what is one thing, only one, that you could do more slowly, but with more soul? The tea cools, the steam fades, and somewhere, a kettle is set aside with both hands, as if in prayer. You rest in this image, and as the warmth remains behind your closed eyes, another wind begins to stir, a new direction in the night's soft path. Soon, we will walk that path again, one different each day. The path the monk once took to the market, but this time, not the usual route, because sometimes, wonder lives just around a turn we never thought to take. Let the warmth of tea linger like the hush before dawn. Let the weight of your limbs sink softly, not with effort, but with trust. You are not following a story now. You are floating through it, carried on the slow current of ancient breath. And now, as the light in the tea maker's hut fades behind you, a breeze lifts the corner of your thoughts and turns you gently toward a stone path, leading down into a quiet valley. There, nestled between rolling hills and a grove of pine, stands a humble temple. It is not grand. It leans slightly, as if listening. The roof has moss growing between the tiles, and the bell only rings when the wind remembers it. At the entrance, pairs of shoes are lined neatly. Cloth, straw, worn leather, each one a story left quietly at the threshold. Among them, a pair of sandals, simple, travel-worn, dusty from journeys repeated. They belong to a young monk, and the lesson he is about to learn begins not in a book, but with a path. Each morning, he is sent to the market, not a punishment, not a ritual, just an errand. Buy rice, return. Day after day, he walks the same road, flat, familiar, efficient, until one morning, the old abbot watches him step into his sandals and says, "Not that way today." The young monk blinks, but the market, the abbot only nods toward the opposite direction. Take a different path. It's not the rice we need, it's your eyes. And so he goes, through a lane he's never noticed, past houses whose windows hold stories he's never seen, across a stream where children balance on stones and wave to strangers, like old friends. He arrives at the market late. He buys the rice, he returns. The next day, the abbot says the same, "Not that way today." And again, a new path opens, over hills, beneath flowering trees, along a shaded trail where wild herbs grow, and dragonflies hover silently over still puddles. The days continue, the paths multiply, and the monk begins to understand. He is not learning directions, he is rediscovering the world, one footstep at a time, one unnoticed petal, one dog barking from behind a gate, one old woman smiling as she sweeps her doorway. It is all part of the lesson, that life, even in repetition, hides novelty in its corners. If only we stop walking in straight lines. The rice was never the point. The point was to remember that the sacred is not only found in meditation halls or ancient texts. It is found in crooked alleys, in new scents, in unfamiliar turns, in presence. We are creatures of routine. We wake, move, speak, repeat, until the days blur like watercolor left in rain. But wonder does not live in repetition. It lives in curiosity, and curiosity is the quiet rebellion of the spirit against sleepwalking through life. The monk's shoes changed nothing about the market, but the monk who returned was no longer the same. So now, gently, without judgment, ask yourself, when was the last time you took a different path? Not because the old one was wrong, but because your eyes forgot how to see. And if you stepped outside your usual route, even for one moment, what new scent, sound or silence might you find waiting for you? The sandals rest again by the door, but they are not idle. They are steeped with places, with glimpses, with little awakenings no one else will ever know. And now, a deeper stillness sets in. We leave behind the market, the temple, the stones, and drift onward, towards something older still, a cave, a voice, and an echo, not of sound, but of self. The village path recedes behind you now, as if melting into the folds of night. The rhythm of sandals on stone gives way to something softer, the sound of breathing, slower now, like a wave retreating across smooth sand. Nothing ahead needs to be reached. Nothing behind needs to be remembered. All that exists is this moment, this drift. Let it carry you through hills covered in fog and valleys cloaked in stillness, until at last the land grows more silent than even the trees. Here, in a place long forgotten by time, lies a cave. Its entrance yawns wide, but not in menace. It welcomes. You step inside, or rather, you are already inside. The air is cool and steady. The light falls away behind you. The world outside, its tasks, its labels, its noise, drops like a heavy robe at the threshold. You carry nothing now but the sound of your own mind. In this cave, a traveler once came to seek silence. He had wandered long, through teachings, through debates, through scrolls and songs, but always the same unrest followed him. A voice, persistent, familiar, critical. It whispered to him, "You're not enough. You always ruin things. You'll never get it right." He thought, perhaps the cave would offer peace. Instead, it echoed, not once, not twice, but endlessly. The moment he spoke aloud, the cave gave it back. Every doubt, every fear, multiplied. He cried out, "Why won't it stop?" And the cave answered, with his own voice, "I ruin things. I'm not enough." He fell silent. The cave did too. And then, something shifted. The next morning, the traveler sat cross-legged on the cold stone floor, and this time, he chose his words, not carelessly, not fearfully, but like a man shaping stone with breath. "I am learning. I am still here. I am not perfect, but I am growing." And again, the cave answered. This time, it was not cruel, it was kind. It became his mirror, not of body, but of belief. And from that day forward, the traveler returned to the cave, not to escape the world, but to hear how he spoke to himself. Because the cave only ever said what he said first, and what he said changed. This cave lives in all of us. It is the echo chamber of the mind. And what we speak into it, it repeats, not as punishment, but as proof of our own power. Many of us carry harsh inner voices, old recordings, born not from truth, but from fear, shame, or distant echoes of others' judgments. These voices speak, not just in words, but in how we shrink, in how we second guess, in how we hold ourselves back from joy. But we are not bound to them. We are the authors of our inner narrative, and with awareness, with intention, with gentleness, we can rewrite. We do not silence the cruel voice by shouting over it. We soften it by speaking differently, until it forgets how to be unkind. The cave did not need walls to trap the traveler, only the words he chose to repeat. So now, in your own cave, the cave of your resting mind, ask quietly, what story have you told yourself too many times? And what new sentence would you like to echo instead? You don't need to speak it aloud, just feel it. Even a whisper carries in still air. The cave breathes with you, the echo quiets, and in that hush, a seed of self-compassion is planted, one that may bloom not tonight, not tomorrow, but in its own season. Now, as you step back out beneath the starless sky, there is no hurry, only return to breath, to space, to the next still clearing on this night's long path, where a lantern waits in a garden well, and a ritual of quiet begins again. The air feels different now, not colder, not warmer, just more still, like something in you has quietly exhaled. The echo of the cave grows faint behind you, not erased, but softened, like footsteps long covered by falling leaves. You move onward through the night, though not with feet, the body rests. It is the spirit now that drifts toward a new space. And in the hush of this new place, there is water, not the roar of a stream, not the trickle of a spring, but the silence of a stone well. It sits at the center of a small, overgrown garden, hidden within the walls of a temple no longer marked on any map. Moss coats the stones, vines climb the gate, the path is barely visible beneath the brush. And yet, each night, without fail, an old monk walks here, carrying a small lantern. He does not come to draw water. He does not come to speak prayers. He comes for a ritual. He lowers the lantern into the well on a long rope, hand over hand, until the light disappears completely. Then he waits, a minute, sometimes more, and gently he draws the lantern back up. He does this each evening, without explanation, without audience. Just this, a ritual between him and the deep. One night, a novice monk follows him, curious. He watches the whole act unfold from the shadows of a cedar tree. When the old monk finishes, the novice steps forward and asks softly, "Master, what are you doing?" The old monk smiles, but doesn't turn. "I am feeding the darkness with light," he says, "and watching how it returns it." The novice is puzzled, but what does it change? The old monk nods slowly. "Me," and then he walks away, leaving behind nothing but the warm breath of the lantern and the quiet mirror of the well. The ritual is simple, and yet, within it lies the power to center a life. We often speak of chaos as something outside us, busy streets, long days, voices that pull us in 10 directions. But the truest chaos lives within the scattered thoughts, the flickering worries, the questions we cannot stop asking. And in the face of that inner turbulence, we don't always need answers, we need anchors. A small practice, repeated daily, not to solve, but to remember stillness, to remember simplicity, to remember ourselves. An anchor ritual doesn't have to be profound. It doesn't require candles or chants or special postures. It only asks this, that you show up for yourself, gently and consistently, in a way that brings you back to breath, back to being, back to what doesn't shift when everything else does. Whether it's writing one honest sentence in a journal, lighting incense as the sun disappears, sitting in stillness with a warm cup of tea and watching steam rise. It is not the act that matters, it is the attention, the devotion, the return. Like the monk and his lantern, you may not always know what your ritual changes, but you will feel it. You will become someone steadier, softer, stronger, not through control, but through rhythm. So now, as your breath flows like the lantern's flame, ask yourself, not as a task, but as a whisper, what small act brings me back to myself? And if I return to it each night, what might I begin to remember? The rope draws upward, the lantern glows again, but something else remains at the bottom of the well. Perhaps the worry you brought here, perhaps nothing at all. We move on, not away, but deeper, deeper into rest, into rhythm, into the forest of this night's teachings, where the wind has begun to pick up once more. But this time, we do not resist it. A tree has fallen ahead, and a lesson in resilience waits in the sound of its still standing roots. Beyond the well and its quietly glowing lantern, the garden gives way once more to forest. Not a forest in the way you remember it. Not wild, not tangled, but hushed, spacious, touched by a kind of reverence that feels older than memory itself. The trees here stand like monks in meditation, their trunks weathered by time, their branches shaped by the rhythm of wind and sun. You pass beneath their silent watch, not walking now, not quite floating either, but being carried, gently, as if on the breath of the earth itself. The air is rich with the scent of pine and loam, and somewhere in the distance, a bird calls once, a low flute-like sound that vanishes before you can hold it. And then, you see it. A great tree has fallen, Its roots jut upward like fingers grasping at a sky that no longer answers. The trunk, thick and noble, lies broken across a moss-covered incline, its crown splayed toward the river bend below. All around it, the forest continues, unshaken, undisturbed. But here, in this clearing, there is a sense of something having paused, as though even the air bows in respect. An old woodsman kneels beside the fallen giant. He does not mourn, not outwardly, nor does he rush to saw or move the trunk. Instead, he sits cross-legged near its base, one hand resting on the bark, as if greeting an old friend whose journey has simply turned inward. A boy from the village finds him there and asks, "Why do you sit beside something that's broken?" The woodsman's eyes do not move from the tree. "Because it is not broken," he says. "It has simply changed its posture." The boy looks confused. "But it can't grow anymore." "Not in the way we measure," the man replies. "But its roots still hold, its body still shelters, and the earth still remembers." Then, almost in a whisper, he adds, "And sometimes, it is only after falling that something begins to give in a deeper way." The boy says nothing more, and the woodsman does not explain. He simply sits, and in the stillness between them, the tree continues. There is a misunderstanding in how we view resilience. We are often taught that to be strong means to remain upright, to stand tall through every storm, to resist collapse. We reward the unshaken, the ones who press on. But true resilience is not the absence of falling. It is the presence of depth, of rootedness, of quiet persistence in the face of change. The fallen tree no longer reaches for the sun, but it becomes a home for moss, a bridge for insects, a haven for small animals. It becomes something new, not by rising again, but by surrendering to what is next. And we too fall. We fall in spirit, in body, in seasons of grief or exhaustion or uncertainty. We fall not because we are weak, but because life shifts and we are not immune to its winds. Yet, even in those moments when we lie horizontal, drained, overwhelmed, unsure, we are still alive, still holding, still part of something that continues. You may not see your own strength when you are down. You may not recognize the value in the stillness that follows collapse. But the earth knows, the forest knows, and if you allow yourself to be quiet enough, you may feel it too, that even in your pause, you are becoming something new, not by effort, by presence, by patience, by the slow, unseen work that happens beneath the surface when we stop demanding to rise. So now, in the stillness of your body, wherever it rests, in the bed that cradles you, in the breath that hums gently through your chest, consider this. What if your rest is not a failure? What if it is part of your becoming? Not all strength is upright. Not all growth is visible. Some of the deepest healing happens while lying down. Some of the most sacred transformations come when we stop trying to prove anything at all. So ask yourself, not with urgency, but with kindness, where in your life have you mistaken stillness for defeat? And what might begin to grow if you honored the place where you've fallen? The forest remains. The tree does not move. And yet, the moment breathes with possibility. You remain here, in this moment, rooted in something unseen, something that does not need to rise in order to be whole. Now, let us continue. The path bends again, this time toward a small village lane, where bread was once shared in silence, and connection was made without a single word. The forest recedes behind you, like a memory gently placed on a shelf, not forgotten, but no longer needing to be held. What remains is the warmth of stillness, the steadiness of breath, and the faint trace of pine and earth in the quiet air that surrounds your resting body. And as we continue, not walking now, but simply being carried by the slow current of story. We come upon a small stone path, edged with worn grass and low walls. It curves softly through a village that feels familiar though you've never been, a place that lives outside of time. The houses are simple, wooden frames, paper windows, doorways draped with faded cloth. Lanterns flicker in a few windows, their glow casting a gentle rhythm of gold and shadow across the ground. A dog sleeps curled by a gate. Somewhere, a bell rings once, then nothing. In the village's center, a fire burns low, just a cooking fire, nothing ceremonial. And beside it, two figures sit on opposite sides, a traveler and an old villager. They do not speak. There are no introductions, no exchange of names, no offers of hospitality or explanations. The traveler arrived only an hour before, weary from days of walking, and the old man had simply nodded and motioned toward the fire. The only sound is the crackle of wood and the soft wind brushing past old rooftops. After a long while, the old man pulls a cloth bundle from beneath his robe. Slowly, carefully, he opens it, revealing a small loaf of bread, rough, dense, unevenly baked, but warm. He tears it in half without looking up and reaches across the fire. The traveler, surprised, accepts it with both hands and bows slightly. Still, no words. They eat in silence, and something happens. Not dramatic, not visible, but in the space between two strangers and a fire, something softens. By the time the bread is gone, the fire has burned down to glowing coals. The traveler leans back, eyes closed. The old man stares into the embers, not thinking, not waiting, just being. There is no need for conversation. Connection, it turns out, does not always need language. The next morning, the traveler continues on his journey. The old man nods once, and that is all. Yet in the traveler's heart, something new has taken root. A kind of quiet companionship that, though wordless, carries the weight of something deeply understood. We often think of connection as something loud, something visible, conversation, laughter, declarations of love, long hours spent explaining ourselves to others. And sometimes it is. But at its deepest, connection is presence. It is the willingness to be with another, without armor, without performance, without the desperate need to fill silence. It is a loaf of bread, torn in half, a fire shared, a gaze that holds, not because it demands anything, but because it does not need to. In a world that constantly encourages us to speak, to post, to explain, to respond, what a rare gift it is to simply sit beside someone and feel enough. Connection begins, not with our mouths, but with our awareness, our openness, our willingness to soften the boundary between self and other. And sometimes, the most powerful moment in a relationship isn't when we say something profound. It's when we sit together, in quiet, and feel no need to speak at all. So now, in your own quiet space, ask gently, not as a challenge, but as an invitation. When did you last sit in the presence of another without needing to be anything? And if you offered someone your quiet attention, your full wordless presence, what might bloom between you? The fire in the village square has long gone out, but its warmth lingers, somewhere just behind your chest. You carry it with you now, not like a memory, but like a kindling ember, ready to glow again whenever kindness calls. And now, we turn once more, not toward another person, but toward yourself, because the next lesson waits not in giving, but in receiving. It is found in a reed, carved into a flute, a reed that once resisted sound until it was hollowed. The village fades, though not completely. A trace of the fire remains, not in light, but in warmth, somewhere near the chest, where memory settles into sensation. As we drift onward, there are no farewells, only the hush of night, deepening around you like water gathering in a still pond. You are floating now, not as a body in space, but as breath without edges. And this next place you arrive at, it comes softly, as if it had been waiting for you all along. You find yourself by a riverbank, not wide, not rushing, just enough to reflect the moonlight like brushed silver. The reeds here grow tall and whisper against one another with each passing breeze. A few stones lie scattered near the edge, flat and moss-dusted. It is the kind of place that asks for nothing, only attention. Near the tallest reed, a craftsman sits. He is not young. His fingers are strong but careful. His eyes carry no ambition, only depth. Across his lap lies a simple reed, freshly cut, still wet at the root. Beside him, a small pile of carved flutes rests on a worn cloth, each one unique, none perfect. He hums to himself, not to practice, not because it keeps the rhythm of his hands steady. A boy approaches, holding a reed he has gathered himself. "Master," he says, "I want to make it sing." The craftsman nods. "Then you must let it be hollow." The boy frowns, "But it's strong now." "Whole, yes," the man replies, and silent. He takes the reed, turns it gently in his hand, and begins to work. A slow carving, a precise hollowing. Slivers fall like feathers to the ground. The boy watches as the reed is opened. "It looks broken," he whispers. "No," says the craftsman. "Now it's ready to speak." When it is done, the man places the flute to his lips and plays a single note, low, pure. The sound glides across the river and disappears into the reeds beyond. He takes the flute in both hands, holds it as if it were something sacred, and the craftsman smiles, not with pride, but with recognition, because something has passed between them, not knowledge, but understanding. In that moment, the boy realizes what so many spend lifetimes trying to unlearn, that what feels like damage is often preparation. That expression comes not from adding more, but from allowing emptiness, that only what is hollow can carry sound. In this world, we are taught early how to protect ourselves. We learn to fill every silence, to close every wound, to become solid, guarded, unbreakable. But what if your true voice waits not behind your strength, but inside your softest place? Self-expression is not about speaking louder or being understood by everyone. It is about making space for what wants to be spoken, without fear of judgment, without need for approval. The flute does not choose its song. It simply allows the breath to pass through. You too have a music inside you, not composed with words or melody, but in how you move, how you love, how you sit quietly and notice beauty when no one else is watching. Your silence has texture. Your presence carries tone. But first something must be hollowed. An old belief, a hardened habit, a shield you no longer need. The boy in the story does not become a musician that day, but he becomes something far more rare. He becomes open. So now, ask yourself, not to answer aloud, not even to decide, just to notice. What part of you has longed to speak, but never felt safe enough to be heard? And what if the breaking you once feared was only ever the beginning of your song? The river moves quietly beside the reeds. The craftsman wraps the finished flute in cloth, and you, like the carved reed, carry something softer now, an invitation to voice, not performance, a reminder that in your quietest self, something already sings. Now, let us continue. Beyond the reeds lies a garden, where snow has begun to fall, even though the air holds no chill. And there, a gardener kneels, planting seeds where nothing yet grows. From the river's edge, where reeds once whispered the quiet music of release, the path carries you inward once more, not as a traveler, but as something weightless, like fog moving across open fields. You don't remember standing, you don't remember walking, yet here you are, drifting deeper, further, softer. The night thickens slightly, not with darkness, but with a sense of holding, like a blanket gently pressed over the shoulders. And now, as the hush settles more fully over your thoughts, you find yourself arriving again, this time at the edge of a wide garden. It is not spring, it is not summer, it is the still season, when nothing blooms and the soil looks barren. Snow covers the ground in patches, uneven, like the pages of a book turned by wind. The trees here stand bare, their branches etched like ink against the pale sky. But someone is kneeling at the center, a gardener, old, small, wrapped in cloth thick enough to make her nearly indistinguishable from the landscape. She leans forward, her hands deep in the soil, still cold, still hard. She is planting. A young passerby, confused by the sight, stops at the gate. "Why are you planting now?" he calls gently. "Nothing can grow." The gardener looks up, her eyes clear, her breath visible in the chill air. "Growth," she says, "does not begin when we see it. It begins in silence, in dark places, long before anyone claps or notices." She returns to her task. The boy watches. There is no reply to offer, only the quiet sound of her fingers pressing seed into earth that seems too cold to open. And yet, she continues, one row, then another, each gesture as calm and certain as the next breath. She does not rush, she does not look for results, she only tends. And something about her stillness changes the boy's silence into stillness too. He watches and stays, though he does not know why. The world often measures growth by what is visible. We are praised when we bloom, when success arrives, when outcomes shine, when proof can be shown. But true growth, the kind that transforms from within, begins in seasons where nothing seems to happen. It begins when the ground is still hard, when our hands feel clumsy, when our minds echo with uncertainty. The gardener plants not because she expects the flower to rise tomorrow. She plants because she trusts the process, because she knows the pattern of things, because she understands that effort, repeated gently over time, becomes transformation. In Buddhism, this is the path of right effort, not striving, not forcing, but steady cultivation. It asks of us patience. It asks for faith, not in a doctrine, but in the unfolding nature of life itself. We are not meant to be finished. We are meant to become, again and again, not by leaps, but by the quiet work of planting seeds we may not yet see. Perhaps you have judged yourself for not being there yet, wherever there might be. Perhaps you've looked at others and wondered why they seem to bloom while you still feel buried. But what if the most important things are growing beneath the surface? What if your roots are strengthening in ways that no one can measure? What if today, without knowing it, you are already beginning? So now, as the body sinks further into stillness and the breath falls into deeper rhythm, ask yourself without pressure, only with presence, what small seed have you planted in silence that still waits for its spring? And can you trust that it will come? The gardener presses one final seed into the soil. She does not rise in triumph. She simply sits, hands resting on her knees, breath warm against the chill. Somewhere beneath the earth, something stirs. Not yet a sprout, not yet a bloom, but something. We leave her there, and we return to the path, where clouds begin to gather, not of worry, but of weather. And soon, a storm may come, but not all storms are meant to be feared. Some are meant to be sat within, and the next story waits in the center of that storm, where a pond holds still, while the winds roar around it. The garden falls away behind you like a page, softly turned, and the snow melts into mist, as if it were never meant to stay. You drift once again, not upward, not forward, but inward, past the boundary where time begins to dissolve. The night, now deeper, holds you more fully, like hands that no longer ask anything from you, only to rest. Ahead, the wind begins to rise, but it does not shake you, it only sings, and through its soft howl you find yourself entering a new place, open, circular, quiet, a clearing, surrounded by tall cypress trees, where a pond rests at the center, not wide, not deep, but still, so still that it reflects the sky without a ripple, so still that the reeds along its edge do not dare move, so still that you almost do not see the child sitting beside it. A boy, not in distress, but waiting. He holds a stone in his palm, smooth, flat, the kind chosen by those who once skipped stones across rivers. But he does not skip it. He only watches the surface of the pond, as if looking for something to return. Minutes pass. Then more. Finally, a figure appears. A woman older, cloaked, carrying a basket of herbs. She watches him quietly. "What are you doing?" she asks. The boy answers without turning. "I'm waiting for the moon to return." The woman looks up. The sky is overcast. No moon in sight. She kneels beside him. "Why the stone?" "I threw it earlier," he says. The pond shattered. The moon disappeared. "I'm waiting for the water to go still again." The woman nods and says no more. They sit together, and slowly, ever so slowly, the surface of the pond begins to return to glass. The clouds shift, and the moon, hidden all this time, reappears, not because it came back, but because the water finally stilled enough to see it again. The boy smiles, and does not throw the stone. The lesson needs no explanation. We are taught to act, to fix, to reach, to solve. But there are moments when the wisest thing we can do is to wait, not with impatience, not with anxiety, but with stillness, with the kind of quiet presence that trusts time to do what force never can. Patience is not weakness. It is not passive endurance. It is the strength to pause when everything in you wants to rush. It is the wisdom to know that not all things bloom faster with effort. In the practice of meditation, we often sit with restlessness. The body twitches, the thoughts swirl, and yet, the teaching is simple. Stay, watch, wait, because the stillness does not come from control. It comes from allowing. Like the pond, the mind settles when we stop stirring it. And then what we were seeking reflects itself back to us. Perhaps there is something in your life right now that feels unclear, unresolved, disrupted by the stone of circumstance. You may have thrown it yourself. You may not know where it came from. But the water has been rippled, and the image you seek, the answer, the peace, the clarity has disappeared, not forever, just for now, and perhaps all that is required is stillness, not as inaction, but as presence. So ask yourself gently, without needing to fix anything in this moment, where in your life are you rushing for resolution, when what's needed is simply time? And what might you begin to see if you allowed the pond to still? The boy rises. He places the stone back on the ground. He walks away slowly, leaving the water undisturbed. And you drift further now, beyond the clearing, beyond the cypress, into a space where wind returns not as disturbance, but as reminder. Because ahead, in a small house on the edge of a quiet hill, a bell is about to crack, but the silence it leaves behind may become your deepest rhythm yet. From the still pond, you drift again, not walking, not floating, but settling, like dust in a beam of morning light. The stories behind you are not forgotten. They have dissolved into the space around you, into the breath that moves slowly now, and into the quiet that no longer feels empty, but whole. The air shifts, the wind fades, and ahead on a hill worn smooth by time and barefoot paths, stands a house of wood and stone. It is not a grand temple. No banners, no gates, just a quiet dwelling where silence lives well. And above the door, a small bronze bell. It no longer rings. A hairline crack runs down one side, and moss gathers where hands once touched its curve. Years ago, it called the monks inside to rise, to sit, to walk, to serve. It held the rhythm of the day, like a heartbeat made of sound. But one morning, during a storm that bent trees and loosened tiles, the bell gave out. It fell from its beam and struck the stone below, splitting just enough to lose its voice. Since then, the bell has remained silent, intact. But still, the new novices, younger and full of habit, asked the master many times, should we replace it? And always, the master said, no need. But how will we know when to rise? One asked. The master smiled gently. If you cannot hear the bell inside, then no bell will wake you. At first, there was confusion. But the days passed, and the monks rose on time. Not because something called them, but because something within them remembered. Discipline, it turns out, is not about the bell. It is about the listening, about forming a rhythm so aligned with your values, so attuned to your quiet commitments, that even when the world offers no cue, you still move in harmony. The cracked bell became a symbol, not of failure, but of maturity. It marked the moment when the monks stopped relying on reminders and began living as if each breath were its own summons, each step, its own bell, each morning, its own reason to begin again. We often wait for external motivation to guide us, a deadline, a voice, an alarm, a consequence. But true self-discipline, Buddhist right effort, rises from within. It is not harsh. It is not punishing, it is consistent, gentle, a practice of showing up, again and again, not because we are forced to, but because we remember why it matters. And yes, there will be mornings when the mind is heavy. There will be days when the desire to pause is stronger than the pull to continue. But it is in those moments that the quiet bell inside is tested and strengthened. Discipline is not about perfection. It is not a rigid adherence to rules. It is a kindness we offer to our future self, the gift of steadiness in a world of fluctuation. You do not need to do everything. You only need to return to the mat, to the breath, to the one step that leads to the next. So now, as your own mind continues to soften and the body finds deeper rest beneath it, ask yourself, not with judgment, but with curiosity, what rhythm have I been waiting for the world to give me, that I might begin cultivating myself? And what would it feel like to move through my life as if the bell still rang? Outside the old house, the cracked bell catches moonlight on its silent curve, and from within the walls, the sound of soft footsteps at dawn. A door opens, a robe rustles, the rhythm continues, without sound. Only presence. Let us keep walking now, not because we are told to, but because something in us is ready. Ahead lies a crooked lane, and down that path, a flickering light, a moth, a lamp, and a lesson in change. The bell fades, though it never rang, and yet its silence echoes in the chambers of awareness, as gently as falling ash. The steps that led you down the path are gone now. Or perhaps they were never there. You are not walking anymore. You are drifting, with the hush of someone remembering their own breath. After a long forgetting, the night bends, the trees grow sparse, and the air begins to glow with the faintest amber hue, as if something ahead is gently burning, not with heat, but with invitation. You find yourself on a narrow lane. The stones here are uneven, worn by centuries of uncertain feet, a fence of crooked wood lines one side, and on the other, wild grasses lean toward a small cottage, lit only by a single lamp hanging near the door. The flame flickers behind its glass, tired but steady, and near the flame, a moth. It circles again and again, wings fluttering in a quiet frenzy, each loop tighter than the last, drawn as moths are, not by heat, but by the illusion of home, a longing for light that was never meant to be held. Inside the cottage, a man sits in shadow. He is old, and his body carries the stillness of someone who has stopped chasing what cannot be caught. He watches the moth with soft eyes, neither annoyed nor amused, simply present. Beside him, a visitor, a younger man, restless, voice low but urgent. "I don't know what's next," he says. "I don't know how to let go of what's passing." The old man says nothing. He only gestures toward the moth, and they watch. The younger man continues, "I built a life around that light. I followed it for years, and now everything is changing." The moth taps the glass, again, again. The old man finally speaks, his voice like dry leaves moving across stone. "The light was never meant to be a destination," he says, "only a reminder." The visitor frowns. "But if I stop chasing it, what then?" The old man lifts the lantern gently, opens the window, and sets it down on the sill. The wind stirs. The moth circles once more, then veers off into the night and disappears. The visitor watches. He does not speak again, because he understands. Change is not something we prepare for. It is something we move through, not like an obstacle to conquer, but like a current we finally stop resisting. We are, many of us, moths circling a single idea of who we should be, what we must have, where we ought to stay. And when that light shifts, when careers end, relationships close, identities dissolve, we panic, we flutter, we cling to the flame, even as it burns. But Buddhist teaching reminds us, impermanence is not the enemy, it is the path. All things arise, all things fall away. What matters is not how tightly we hold, but how gently we release. The moth does not vanish in sorrow. It returns to the night where it belongs. So too can we. There are seasons where everything we knew begins to loosen, when we are asked to shed not just roles, but versions of ourselves we once held sacred. And in that shedding, grief arrives, fear too, but something else also comes. Space, possibility, flight. To embrace change is not to enjoy it. It is to trust that who you are becoming cannot be known from within who you've been. So now, as your breath continues to lengthen, like a thread unwinding in the dark, ask yourself with compassion, what have you been circling that no longer feeds your flight, and what might be waiting just beyond the lamp? The cottage grows smaller behind you now. The flame flickers once more, then fades as the wind rises gently, and with it, you rise too, not upward, but inward, to a place where bread is shared in silence, and kindness begins its quiet ripple across the surface of an unseen world. The wind that carried the moth has softened now, curling like breath into the folds of your chest. No longer tugging, no longer pushing, only cradling. And as the glow of the lantern fades into the hush of memory, you arrive once more, not by movement, but by stillness, into another corner of the world that exists only in this kind of night. Here, the road is made of dust, flattened by countless feet that never left a mark. There are no signs, no names, just a path curving around the edge of a quiet village and dipping low toward a stream that has forgotten how to rush. The trees hang low with sleep, the grass bends with silence, and just beyond a crumbling gate stands a baker's house, small, leaning slightly, and fragrant with memory. The door is open, not wide, just enough. Inside, a man wipes flour from his hands. His face is marked, not by age, but by repetition, by mornings before sunrise, by dough kneaded in the dark, by loaves given to people who never asked his name. And at his feet, a dog, thin, mud-flecked, tail tucked but eyes waiting. It has returned for the third day now. Each morning, it comes and waits by the doorway, and each morning, the baker tears off a piece of bread before the rest go to market, kneels down, and places it gently on a flat stone beside the gate. No command, no praise, no attention drawn, just an offering. He never speaks to the dog, and the dog never lingers after the bread is gone. They share nothing, and yet, they share everything. Years pass, the dog stops coming, the baker grows older, and one day, without warning, he is summoned by the village magistrate. An unexpected gift, a letter, a deed. It is from a man, wealthy, now dying, who once wandered these roads as a boy, hungry, alone, afraid. He had slept in barns, he had eaten what he could find, but what he remembered most was a piece of warm bread laid gently on a stone, offered not with charity, but with quiet dignity. It had kept him alive that morning, and the memory had kept him soft for years. The kindness had rippled far beyond the fence. Kindness, true kindness, does not begin with fanfare. It begins in moments so small, they vanish before the mind can name them. A look, a gesture, a pause, a loaf shared not because it is surplus, but because something in us recognizes the hunger in something else. We are taught to measure goodness in great acts, in generosity made visible, but the deepest offerings are often silent, anonymous, forgotten by the giver, but not by the one who received. And what is even more profound is that kindness does not always come back to us from the direction we send it. The bread offered to the dog returned in the form of gratitude from a stranger. The hands that once gave were later held. We do not give to be remembered. We give because it softens the world, because it quiets something inside, because it affirms without words that in this brief life we are not alone. So now, in the hush of your own resting body, ask yourself with gentleness, what small gesture of yours, long forgotten, might still be echoing in someone's life, and what simple act of kindness could you offer tomorrow, without needing to be seen? The baker returns to his bench. The stone at the gate still sits there, empty, but perhaps just before dawn, it will be filled once more. And now, with this warmth settling gently behind your ribs, we continue, not into the village, but into the fields beyond, where a bucket rests, not full, not broken, but leaking, and through that slow dripping, a lesson in letting go. The scent of bread lingers, not in the air, but in the heart, a warmth without source, a comfort without edges. And as you drift onward through this night, that no longer feels quite like night, the world continues to unfold with the softness of breath. The road fades behind, the village sleeps without dreams, and ahead, open fields stretch wide beneath a pale and infinite sky. The stars are quiet here, and near the base of a sloping hill, under the crooked shade of an old fig tree, rests a wooden bucket, its handle worn smooth by many hands, its rim chipped gently by time. A trail of water leads from it like a thread of moonlight, glistening, uneven, vanishing into the thirsty soil. Beside it, a farmer kneels. He is not hurried, not distressed. He watches as the last drops fall from the base of the bucket, a small hole near the seam, just wide enough to whisper away the water that he carried from the river. Another man approaches from the road. "You should patch that," he says, pointing to the leak. But the farmer only smiles, his hands resting on his knees. "No," he replies, "it waters the path." The man frowns, "But it wastes your effort." The farmer looks down the hill, toward the flowers blooming wild along the narrow trail. Daisies, lilies, bluebells where there once was dust. Not all loss is waste, he says. Some things leave us so they can give elsewhere. And he lifts the bucket once more, begins the walk again, and leaves behind another silent blessing in his wake. This is the story of letting go, not as failure, not as giving up, but as release. So much of our pain comes not from what has been taken, but from what we refuse to loosen. We hold tightly to identities, to old beliefs, to past wrongs, to plans that no longer fit the shape of our days. We grasp at outcomes, relationships, timelines, hoping that by clutching harder, we can stop the inevitable movement of things. But all things move, all things pass, and sometimes what leaks from us, the energy, the time, the attention we once thought wasted, nourishes places we cannot see. In Buddhist teaching, non-attachment is not about apathy. It is about trusting the flow of impermanence, trusting that just as the bucket's water nourished unseen roots, your efforts, your kindness, your presence, however incomplete or imperfect, may bloom somewhere far beyond your knowing. To let go is not to discard, it is to open your hand, to stop trying to hold what was never meant to stay, to allow space for something new. The farmer's bucket still leaks, and still he carries it, because the hole is no longer a flaw, it is part of the offering. And perhaps your grief too, your fatigue, your letting go of dreams that once fit you like skin, perhaps these are not brokenness, perhaps they are the openings through which your deeper life flows. So ask yourself now, as the breath moves slowly in and slowly out, what are you still trying to carry, full, even though it's time to pour it out? And if you did, if you let it spill, let it soak into the earth of your becoming, what new thing might begin to grow? The bucket reaches the well once more. Water flows in, and as it's lifted, it leaks again, quietly, faithfully, without resistance. The trail glistens, and flowers bloom, whether seen or not. Now, let us walk again, not toward more, but toward less, toward a pond that reflects only when the stirring stops, where patience waits, and a boy once held a stone without throwing it. The hill behind you softens into shadow, the flowers along the path fading into a hush, too quiet for memory to hold. You are lighter now, not because you've escaped anything, but because something inside has begun to loosen, just enough to breathe. The stars above have shifted slightly, as if making space for the next part of your journey. There is no map, only movement, and soon you arrive again, not at a new place, but at a familiar one. The pond, still, circular, quiet. It has waited, not impatiently, but in its nature, as ponds do. The cypress trees stand as they were, watching without needing to be seen, and beside the water's edge, the same stone lies where the boy once sat, holding his breath and the smooth rock that never left his hand. But he is gone now. In his place, the stone remains, and in the water's reflection, the moon appears once again, this time uninterrupted. There is something about returning to a place after you've changed. The world looks the same, and yet the silence feels different, not empty, but full of what you now carry within. A woman approaches, slowly, her steps barely disturbing the earth. She wears no robes of distinction, her hands are lined with age and care, and in them, she carries nothing. She kneels beside the pond as the boy once did, but she does not wait for the water to clear. She does not seek her reflection, she only watches the ripples already there, and smiles, because she knows the stillness will return when it is ready, not before, not because she commands it, but because it is in its nature. And so, she waits. There is a patience in her that does not wear the mask of urgency. It is not frustrated, not bored, not tired. It is alive, present, engaged with the unfolding of what is, not with the fantasy of what could be. She watches a single leaf float across the surface. She listens to the distant call of an unseen bird. She breathes. Patience, in its truest form, is not waiting for time to pass. It is being fully here while time passes. It is the refusal to rush the unfolding of life, the willingness to let clarity arise without force. In our hurried world, patience is often mistaken for weakness or passivity. But in Buddhist practice, it is the fruit of deep awareness. It is the mark of a mind that has made peace with not knowing, with not controlling, with allowing. To sit by the pond is not to give up. It is to give in to this moment, just this one. You may be carrying something right now, a decision not yet made, a conversation not yet had, a longing not yet fulfilled. And the temptation is to stir the water, to throw the stone, to demand the moon return. But the moon has never left. It is simply waiting for the water to be ready. And you are ready too, not to act, not to resolve, but to sit beside your own stillness and trust that what is unclear now will become visible in its own time. So ask yourself, gently, as the breath deepens like roots seeking water, where have you been rushing for an answer, when what is needed is a pause? And if you allowed space, just space, what truth might rise on its own? The woman does not move. She does not need to. A breeze crosses the pond, the ripples stir, then fade again. And somewhere far beneath, unseen, lilies begin to rise. We move forward now, beyond the water, toward a small fire flickering behind a curtain of trees. There, a storyteller prepares to speak, but this time, not with words alone, with story, with memory, with voice, that rises only once it has been hollowed. The surface of the pond remains behind you, not as a scene remembered, but as something internal, an image now folded into the quiet fabric of breath. You carry it with you, though your hands are empty. You walk without walking. You listen without needing sound. The body rests. The mind exhales. And now, you enter a grove. Thin trees, spaced just far enough apart to let the moon weave between them, casting long shadows that do not disturb. The wind here does not howl. It moves like a whisper held between cupped hands. There is a clearing, round and low, where someone has built a fire of pine branches. The flames do not rise. They fold and lean, glowing with the color of slow embers. Sitting beside it is an old man. He holds no book. He recites no teaching. Only a flute, worn simple, carved from reed, its edges softened by years of touch. He raises it not to perform, but to remember. The sound that comes is not polished. It is not proud, but it carries something rare. Honesty. Each note rises like a breath too long held, finally released. Around him, a few travelers sit, some wrapped in cloaks, some barefoot in the earth. They do not speak, they listen. Not because the music is perfect, but because it is true. When the last note fades, the fire gives a soft pop. A young woman leans forward and asks, "How did you learn to play like that?" The old man chuckles, sets the flute on his knee, and looks not at her, but at the flame. "I didn't learn," he says. "I unlearned." She tilts her head. He continues, "When I was young, I tried to master it. I read, I studied, I copied, but everything I played sounded correct and dead, like something meant to impress, not to speak." He picks up the flute again, turns it in his hands. "Then one day, I stopped trying. I sat by a river. I let the water speak. I let my breath come as it was, and I carved this flute from a reed that bent toward me in the wind. Since then, I've played only what needed to leave me. The woman is silent, not because she doesn't understand, but because she does. There is a moment after that, when no one moves, not even the wind. Because something sacred has been shared, not in the music, but in the truth behind it. Self-expression is not about being heard by the world. It is about hearing yourself clearly enough that the words or sounds that rise are no longer for approval, but for release. We all carry stories that never found language, feelings that curled up quietly in the corners of the soul. But to express is not always to explain. Sometimes, it is simply to let something move through you, like breath through a hollow reed. In Buddhist practice, expression often begins in silence. From silence, form arises. From stillness, voice, and the voice that comes is not meant to convince. It is meant to liberate, to speak, not to be understood, but to be whole. The old man's flute may never play in a hall, but it echoes in the hearts of those who sit near him. Because what he plays is not a song, it is his presence. And perhaps your voice, your art, your truth, your quiet yearning, does not need to be louder, or better, or more visible. It may only need to be real. So now, as your breath flows like wind through reeds, ask softly within, what have I longed to say, but silenced before it could take shape? And if I allowed it to move through me, not for others, but for myself, what might it free? The fire dims, the flute rests once again, and though no one speaks, something shared lingers, like smoke, like warmth, like song. You drift onward, through the trees, toward a figure kneeling in a snowy field, where a garden sleeps beneath frozen ground, and where patience and faith begin to take root once again. The sound of the flute fades behind you like a sigh released into night air, carrying with it the weight of unsaid things. What remains is not music, but something quieter, an invitation to keep listening, even when there is nothing left to hear. You move without motion, guided now not by curiosity, but by stillness. And still, the journey continues. Ahead the trees thin, the air cools, and underfoot the ground softens with snow. But it is not harsh, it is not biting, it is the kind of winter that blankets, not buries. A quiet field spreads open beneath a sky washed in silver. No sun, no stars, just the soft glow of a world wrapped in rest. And there, kneeling in the snow, is a gardener. You recognize her, perhaps not by face, but by presence. The same woman who once pressed seeds into cold earth beneath bare branches. The same who whispered to the soil even when nothing answered. She is older now, or perhaps simply deeper. Before her lies the garden, still covered in frost, still silent, but not dead. She moves slowly, brushing away snow with her hands, not urgently, not expectantly. She simply clears enough space to feel the earth again. Her fingers press into the dirt, not to plant, but to greet it. And then she sits back, resting on her heels, eyes closed, breath calm. A traveler passes, confused. There's nothing growing, he says. Why are you here? She opens her eyes and smiles. Not to him, but to the earth, because this is where the growing begins. But you can't see anything. She nods. And that's exactly why I'm here. The traveler tilts his head. She continues. In spring, everything appears, but in winter, everything prepares. He says nothing more, because deep down, he knows she's right. We are conditioned to see progress as visible, to chase milestones, measure outcomes, and celebrate only what is clear to others. But the most essential changes, the kind that reshape our understanding, deepen our compassion, soften the edges of who we were, begin in silence, in the dark, in the cold, like seeds, like roots, like wisdom. The gardener does not dig to force growth. She waits with the soil. She keeps it company. She believes in what she cannot yet see. This is the heart of a growth mindset. Not the belief that we must always be achieving, but the understanding that we are always becoming, even here, even now, even when nothing seems to be happening. Buddhist teachings remind us the present moment holds all that we need, but our minds often leap ahead into outcomes, into comparisons, into doubts. To live with a growth mindset is to sit in the winter of our lives without rushing spring, to trust that healing is happening underground, to know that understanding takes time, that even our struggles are part of the shaping, and that the version of ourselves we long for will not arrive suddenly, but slowly, in cycles, with patience. So now, as your body rests beneath the quiet snow of this story, ask yourself, not to answer, but to feel, where have I mistaken stillness for stagnation, and what might be growing beneath the surface? Even now, the gardener remains, not working, not waiting, just being. The snow continues to fall, soft and slow, covering her knees, her hands, the soil. But not her faith. She smiles, because she knows it is not wasted time. It is becoming time. And now one last path remains tonight. One more journey inward, to a place beyond effort, beyond self, where forgiveness becomes the doorway through which peace finally enters. The snow fades, not by melting, but by dissolving gently into the folds of your breath. The world narrows now, not into smallness, but into intimacy, a closeness between you and the quiet that surrounds you, like water surrounds a leaf. You are no longer walking, or even drifting. You are settling, resting into something older than thought, still, and here, where the sky seems barely to breathe, you find yourself standing before an old cottage, crooked and silent at the edge of a hill. Its roof is lined with moss. Its door doesn't quite close, and hanging by the window, rusted and thin, is a small birdcage. Inside, nothing. The cage is empty, and yet, the door remains closed. Within the cottage, an old monk stirs the embers of a low fire. The room is sparse. A few cushions, a cracked teacup, and near the wall, the cage that he no longer looks at. But it was once full. Many years ago, a small bird lived there. He had rescued it, or so he believed, nursed it from injury, fed it with care, and in return the bird had sung, every morning, every dusk. Its song had become the rhythm of the house, the sound that made silence feel like company, until one day, without warning, the bird stopped singing, then stopped eating, and one morning, it lay still. He buried it by the fig tree, but left the cage hanging by the window. He could not open it, not because he didn't understand that it was empty, but because part of him still held on, not to the bird, but to the idea that if he opened it, something would be lost forever. Years passed, seasons changed. The song never returned, and the cage remained closed. One evening, as the wind pushed softly against the shutters, the monk sat by the fire and looked toward the cage. He stood, walked to the window, and with a hand that did not shake, unlatched the tiny door. Nothing happened, no song, no sudden light, only stillness. But in that stillness, something lifted, not in the air, in him. Forgiveness is not always dramatic. It does not always arrive with tears or revelation. Sometimes, it is a quiet decision to open a door long left closed, not to forget, not to justify, but to release. We often hold ourselves captive, not with chains, but with memory, with guilt, with the refusal to soften where we once hardened. The monk had long forgiven the bird, but not himself, and so, the cage remained. But when he opened it, he began to live again, not in the echo of what was lost, but in the space now made available. In Buddhist teaching, forgiveness is an act of release, not of agreement, not of pretending, but of freeing the heart from the weight it was never meant to carry. To forgive does not mean we condone harm. It means we choose not to carry it forward. Sometimes, the one we must forgive is another. Sometimes, it is ourselves. And often, we do not know we've been holding on until the moment we let go. So now, as your breath continues its soft descent and the world inside grows wider, ask yourself, gently, lovingly, what old cage have you left hanging, and what part of you is ready now to open it? The monk returns to his seat. He stirs the fire once more, and outside the window, the small cage sways in the wind, its door open, catching the moonlight like a smile. No song, no bird, only space and peace. And now, the stories rest, not ended, but fulfilled. They have done their work, and you have returned, not to the beginning, but to yourself. You have traveled far tonight, but not across lands, not through time. You have walked softly through the quiet gardens of your own heart, sat with monks and gardeners, listened to flutes, waited beside ponds, and opened cages long forgotten, not to seek answers, but to be still enough that the answers could stop needing to come. Each story was never truly about the characters, or the paths, or the settings. They were about you, not the you that carries burdens in daylight, not the you that plans and solves and speaks, but the deeper you, the you that breathes beneath the noise, the one who watches clouds without needing to name them, the one who remembers how to listen, how to rest. Now there is nothing left to hold, no thought to fix, no image to chase. You are already here, whole, silent, cradled by the same earth that holds the garden, the temple, the well, the fire, the wind. Let the last of your thoughts dissolve like ripples in a pond. Let your breath rise and fall like the reed in the flute. Let your limbs grow heavy, not because you are tired, but because you are finally allowed to stop. You are not sleeping alone tonight. You are sleeping with yourself. And here, in the hush of your own presence, you are safe. You are enough. You are home. Now close the door gently behind this story and rest. Just rest. Good night. And may peace walk with you, even in dreams.